Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Pondy's Tache with myself, Dave Welford, Jon Scoltock, and James Downie. Today's topic is quite subjective. It's one of these, who's the best again? And I'm sure it'll be quite controversial. Today we're on who is the best of the Flying Finns, and I'm quite staggered because the guys beside me have told me there's no place for Henry Toivonen or Pondy Airikkala. I'm shocked at that. I would have had him in a second, everybody. So, James, can you tell the audience why we're not getting the two great Finns in, please?
Because I'd say just because the standard of Finnish drivers is so high. I think if from any other nationality they'd walk in. But they probably count as wasted talents, both of them.
Toivonen was at the top of his game.
Not for long, though.
Okay. I think he changed the face of rallying just like Vatanen. But anyway, does anybody else think they should be in?
Yeah. We should debate him if you all do, but
He's an absolute disgrace to a man.
I mean, Toivonen it's a tough one. Obviously, he didn't live out his full career, but definitely not Pondy.
I would agree with that. It's surprising how many people in the UK love Pondy, and would definitely have him on the list because of his time in the British Championship. What did he do? He won the BS. He won the REC in '89. Was he not leading the 1,000 Lakes in '77 with Chevette?
I think.
Yeah,
it started off pretty well, and then I can't remember what happened. It broke down or something.
And of course, you could argue that he was in lesser cars in the 80s in the BRC, which was a total detrimental to his results. So what we're going to do, we've got 10 drivers. Timo Mäkinen, Hannu Mäkelä, Markku Alén, Timo Salonen, Ari Vatanen, Juha Kankinen, Tommy Mack, Mikko Hirvonen, and Jari Latvala. So I think we may as well start at the start. We'll go for Timo Mäkinen. Who would like to begin? I'm going to pick Eenie Meenie, Dave Welford. Tell us about Timo.
So Timo's the original Flying Finn, isn't he? Again, his career started well before the WRC was a proper thing. So a lot of his success is before the stats. But he's, like I said, the original Flying Finn. He won 1,000 Lakes, was it 4 times? 3 with the Mini, once with the Escort. He won the RAC 3 consecutive times. What else did he do? I think he actually only got 4 WRC victories, but like I say, it's hard to judge when it's before the World Championships started. And then once it did, then you had your Mikulas, and Markku Alén came on the scene by then, so he was getting a bit past it. But I think he's definitely worthy of a spot in the top 10 just because he's the original.
Okay. I would suggest that your Mikulas and Aléns and stuff were about in the mid-70s when he was winning the REC and stuff. The competition was quite strong. He also won the 1,000 Lakes. He won the Monty, didn't he? He won the Monty.
Yeah, the Monty.
In a Mini.
That's what I was thinking.
Definitely deserves his spot. It's hard to compare him with the modern era. To me, it was before my time. So he's not my favourite in any shape or form, only because I don't know enough about him. James?
I would say for that, I think you covered the sort of 70s quite well with him. What I would say, he didn't actually compete in the WRC event until he was 36 or 7, and he still won 4 of them, so that's not bad going in that era. He was very unlucky. If you look at sort of RAC rallies from the 60s and early 70s, he led most of them, some by a very long margin. I think we're sort of more lucky, could have had sort of 6 or 7 RAC, which wouldn't have been beaten to this day. I have chatted to some older rally fans over the years, guys who actually witnessed rallying in the 60s, and they say it was a life-changing experience to actually see Timo Mäkinen literally blast side on the lock stops out of the fog in the 6-cylinder Austin Healey, that noise just echoing around the forests, totally sideways, all 7 spot lamps on full. So it was basically something that, you know, a jaw-dropping moment that changed their life, made them rally fans forever. So you've got to respect things like that. And I would say that the actual phrase itself, flying fins, is coined for him alone. So again, for that reason, you know, it would feel wrong to not discuss him in this list.
I'm actually welling up here, mate, with the description of the big Healy.
Yours as well, it was very emotional.
Absolutely. He was an all-rounder because I believe he did power boating as well. I'm sure he did the Round of Britain, and he won it as well. Can't remember what year that was. He actually had a lot of retirements in the sport. He retired far more than he finished. I think a lot of that was down to he had a couple of seasons with Peugeot, was it 504 and stuff like that, and he wasn't a great team at the time. So, John, you'll maybe not remember a lot much about Timo.
Definitely before my time. Yeah, he's hard to judge, isn't he? Because the sport was so different, and I think all of the other guys on the list, at least there was some overlap into the later eras, even though some of them competed alongside him. But I mean, yeah, to have 4 wins when you started late is good. I had a Finland win in the mini, didn't he? Even though the bonnet flipped open, I think. 3 RAC wins, 3-time Finnish champion as well, I think. So definitely talented. And I don't know the exact details, but I think he also did pretty well in saloon car racing in Finland.
I was just trying to think that. I think he did some racing with BMC, didn't he?
Yeah. I can't remember exactly what, but he definitely won a championship or 2.
Okay.
Random.
We'll move on to Mr. Airikkala. What a guy, seriously. Still can't believe he's gone, really. I'll take the lead on this one, I think. He's won just about everything there is to win. I'm going to say, for every yin, there's a yang. He didn't win on tarmac. And I would argue that was because he was up against Porsches, Stratos, all these type of 131s. You know, and he went through the 70s mostly with Escort and stuff. He had some odd choices at Toyota in the 70s, but I think he won the 1,000 Lakes in that. And 76 maybe. He drove for Mercedes, that was for a big payday. That's the only reason. It wasn't to win rallies. See if I've got anything written down about him. 4,000 Lakes wins, 4 RACs, 3 times he won Portugal, won the Scottish 5 times when it was WRC level. Obviously, he only won 1 title. He nearly won the 79 title. I think he was only a point behind Bjorn at the end of the year. London to Mexico. He was the first foreigner, the first foreigner to win Safari Rally. First person from overseas.
Driver.
First person from overseas win it. Did you know what I mean? Do you know what amazes me? It was 28 years ago that he retired. And that just makes me think of my mortality, you know. Where has it gone? 28 years ago since I retired, honestly. But for me, what stands him in such high stead was Vatanen couldn't catch him in an Escort. And he just said he was just too good. So that's me. I've waxed lyrical about Hanu. Over to you, James.
Well, where do you start with Mikkola? I mean, you could almost do one of these broadcasts about him alone, couldn't you? You mentioned sort of certain career high points, you know, the 72 Safari, coming back to win again in 1987, 15 years later when he was sort of well into his 40s was another incredible achievement. I think there's just one thing he did, which just changed the face of rallying forever. And you could say it was his vision. He signed for Audi. You know, it was a team type of car that people laughed at before, wasn't it? It was a bit of a joke car. And they came up with this four-wheel drive technology. He pioneered it, pioneered the driving style for it. But then took everyone to the cleaners straight on the first 5 stages of the 81 Monte Carlo, didn't he? And just really kind of, you know, everyone just realised this was just going to be the same again. Obviously, the car broke down a bit after that, but it changed the face of rallying. It changed the face of Audi as well. I mean, Audi would not be the company it is today without what he did in rallying, and that was down to him and signing for that company when you know, he was at the top of his game, and it was a big risk for him. Paid off massively. Won the world title, won so many rallies on it. I think probably the biggest story of all, though, it's when he was right almost at the end of his career, and he almost won the RAC rally in a Mazda when he was 46, 47. And I was so gutted that he didn't do it. I really wanted him to do it. But just to add that was the sort of trickiest RAC was ever from conditions. And so many guys went off there, and he the Mazda was nowhere near the fastest car. It was 1.6, wasn't it? And just get that to the front, just all this sort of skill and mastery and experience and talent's got it there. And just to blow it sort of 5 stages from the end, it was just like, I was devastated. Yeah. It's hard to look past this guy, I think.
I think he was blinded by the sunlight. Was it Gilrig?
Langdale, I believe.
Langdale, sorry, it was Langdale. Yeah. He was leading. There wasn't far to go. That was just after Alain put it off in Eliban.
Yeah.
But you're right about Audi. I think for me, Hanu was reaching his peak, maybe 81, when he joined Audi. I mean, Audi wanted Hanu because of he wasn't a Vatanen with this rear-wheel drive, sideways, very controlled Hanu. So that's why Audi chose him. Also, his development skills were fantastic. So it's a very valid point you're making, James. Dave?
Yeah, I just need to correct you on his Thousand Lakes victories. He actually won it 7 times.
He did, yeah.
Yeah,
which is
4, I think.
4, but some of them were before WRC. But he was, what was he called? The Grand Old Master of Rallying on one BHP production, I believe. And he definitely was. I mean, his career went from the late 60s to the early 90s. So some longevity there. He was a man that did many firsts as well. Like you say, first European to win the Safari. He was the first driver to make 100 starts in the WRC. First driver to win with 4-wheel drive. And he still has the record. Oh, no. Sorry. That's Bjorn Valdegard has the record for oldest winner, I think, now. But
yes.
Yeah, it was just phenomenal talent. Like you say, he was probably the most consistent and best all-rounder of his time. I think when you look at his stats, his finishing on the podium it's ridiculous. Let's see if I've got it here. Something like 44 podiums out of 123 starts. So he's definitely the man that you want in your team. Obviously, he was a legend in the UK. All his wins in Wales, Scotland, the Mintex Rally. We've even got a corner named after him in Dolby, haven't we, James? And like you say, I think anyone that witnessed him in a Mark II Escort, even though he wasn't the most sideways, he carried the most speed through a corner, and it was just, blinding. I think that's one thing growing up, my dad always went on about, seeing Mikkola in the Escort or in the Quattro as well. Changed his perspective of rallying from that point. So for me, Mikkola's always been just one of the top drivers anyway, even though, he's only got 1 championship win to his name. He's achieved so much else apart from that. And I've just, like you say, I can't believe he's left us this year. He's much missed.
Absolutely. I think what I was saying about him coming to the peak of his career, when he won the title in '83, Stig was quicker than him, his teammate Stig. Stig was actually told to slow down a couple of events so they could give Hanu, the victory which he
Championship
definitely deserved. I think if there'd been more, if the WRC for drivers was professional as opposed to the Fear Cup in the 70s, I think Mikel would have dominated it. Great driver. John, thoughts on Mikola?
Yeah, not too much to add. I think you've covered a lot of it. I think longevity is an interesting point, and he's probably one of the ones. There's a few in this list, but if you look at his competitiveness through different eras, from 60s, then Group 4, Group B, Group A, to be successful for that long and competitive for that long, it's very impressive. Stage wins, I think he's one of the highest scorers of our top 10 as well. And just a quick one on the subject of Audi, or not on the subject of Audi, but similar to Audi, I think you could probably credit him with a lot of success with the Escort as well, in terms of their brand. Won London to Mexico, which created the Escort Mexico. That's quite a thing to have, isn't it?
Some legacy. I think for me again, it was one of his greatest performances was when he came over to Scotland in '72. The Scottish and the Welsh were the huge rallies. And he came over to Scotland and thrashed Roger Clark. I mean, the Scottish should have been called the Roger Clark rally back then because he dominated it. But you get this young Finn coming over and destroyed Clark. I mean, that was the start of it, I've always thought Hanu Mikola looks more like an accountant than a rally driver. He's so calm, and as opposed to your Allens and stuff, that kind of anger.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping that when we put our top three in, Mr. Mikola will be up there. Anyway.
Just want to say a couple of other things on him before I go. I mean, we move on. It's his RAC record. I know people mentioned the 4 wins, but the years when he didn't win it, he was always second. It was something like 8 years in a row. He was either first or second from 77 to 84. That's a rally that was hard. That was a blind rally with 500 stage miles. And another thing, I think he's credited with 18 WRC rally wins. But he won 3,000 late rallies in a Safari before 73, which, is unlucky they aren't credited as well.
Yeah, definitely. And he gave Toyota the first WRC victory as well.
No, is that in Finland?
Is that 1,000 likes, I guess?
Yeah, 76.
Right, folks, I think we'll move on now to Maximum Marcoux. Who's want to take the lead on this? John?
Yeah, getting a little bit closer to my era, a little bit anyway. Another driver who was competitive in multiple eras, obviously really good in the Fiat, and then switched to Lancia, and again still competitive in Group A with driving Deltas and things. I think he might have the most stage wins of anyone on the list, perhaps. One may have done a bit more research than me. And he's right up there on podiums as well, I think. So, yeah, another great driver.
Okay.
Yeah, just really long-standing, long career drivers who could just jump into seemingly anything.
I think he had 801 stage victories or something like that, which was, I think, Sebastian Loeb has beaten that record.
Oh, yeah.
I think he has. Which, do you know, what we'd add to that is it's an incredible achievement by Loeb when you consider how few stages there are now. In the old days, it was 60, 70 stages. Now there's maybe 25 and stuff like that, It's incredible by. But thoughts on Loeb, David?
Not so many people that could beat him now.
The Italian Finn.
Yes.
Well, he looked like he was going to replace Mikola. He definitely was following in his footsteps. 5,000 Lakes victories, won in Portugal a few times. He stayed with Fiat Lancia for 16 seasons, I believe, which is unheard of, really. I mean, like you say, his stage victories, I think it's 840 he racked up in the end, and it was only just beaten in the last couple of years. And when you look at his stats, it is amazing how much he's succeeded. But obviously, he wasn't officially a world champion. But I think when he won the Drivers' Cup in '78, you have to take that as a world championship win, because the people he was up against and the teams, it was definitely as tough, if not tougher, than some other championships later on. And obviously, 1986 was a bit of a kick in the teeth for him. But he probably didn't have his best season that year. But then what was he, second and third in the championship about 4 times. So he was always there on the money. And again, his career went on well into the 90s. And just a blinding quick driver, as you'd expect from Finland.
Absolutely. For me, I absolutely loved Markku. Possibly my favourite. I'm not saying he was the best, but I'm saying he was my favourite. He had character. Who'd be an interviewer, an end of stage interviewer back then? Nobody knew what Markku they were getting me open the door. Mr. Angry with eyes went massive, you know. He was a scary guy, Markku. But what a career that man had. He was basically Italian. The Italian fans actually adopted him, really. They loved him. His stats, the youngest winner of a WRC event, I think that was Portugal, 1975. I think he was 24. I don't know if that stood until Henry beat him in 80, the Sunbeam. 5 Portugal, 6 in Finland. He had to be on this list despite not winning the championship. When I look back at the flying Finns, Mikkola, Allen, they're all there, and it's very hard for me to separate them. They're all right up there. What I would say about Markku is he won on tarmac, unlike Hannu. I mean, Hannu maybe won some events like San Remo or something, which had tarmac sections, but he never won Tour de Corse, which Allen did. You could argue that he had the 037 to do that, which was the ultimate spec.
You could also argue that Walter Roll got a puncture in '83 and Team Morris kept him behind Markku.
Absolutely.
They were 1, 2, 3, 4 at the time, weren't they, once year?
And was it the year before that Henry had, was Henry not winning? Or was Portugal Bindit? That was a lot of time that year.
I think there's also like 84 he won it, but that was after Harry had kind of blown him away in the Persia and crashed.
Aye.
So he got 2 wins, but he was probably a bit so fortunate in both. But he deserved the look. I'm not going to say it's kind of wrong that he was wins on his kind of CV. So,
what do you rate him, James?
Well, he's brilliant, isn't he? He's just, I mean, how a guy like that didn't win the world title, it's still a great mystery of rallying, isn't it? And I think, as you rightly pointed out, certainly statistically, he had everything else going for him. But just aside from a stage with it, I think he actually had the biggest number of WRC career rally wins at one point. I think I'm still Colin McRae.
Yeah.
Without winning the world title. He's obviously associated most with Lancia and Fiat, and he did stay loyal to them for a couple of barren years, sort of in the early 80s. But another thing we've not mentioned is he did for Subaru what Mikkola did for Audi. He signed for them when they were still a bit of a kind of, I won't say they're a joke, they were basically used to making sort of much slower kind of drive through bay cars, weren't they? And then so they put a lot of money into legacy, and he signed for him after 16 years with Lancia, and he put him on the map, didn't he? And straight up, I think that and then McRae signed just shortly after, but it was Allen that made the first move to sign for him. And again, look at the success story that Subaru have got as road, and it's down to the success in rallying, which Marco Allen is a starter of. Also, a lot of people don't necessarily like him as a character because he could be, like, as Bob pointed out, really grumpy and rude. That's quite endearing, I think. Just the fact that he wasn't kind of Mr. kind of plastered on TV sort of like cliche voice. He really would just be like, "Yeah, what do you want?" Setting the stage and things like that. Taking reports. It was fantastic, really. Yeah, loved him. Don't know if I put him in the top 3, but that's because it's such a high standard.
Well, wait till the end. We'll wait to the end before we get to.
What an awesome driver.
Absolutely. Anyway, I think I should really thank the advertisers, ScottishGritting.com and Heartless Competition Tyres. Let's move on. Next up, guys, Timo Salonen. And we're going to begin with David.
Thanks. So Timo is one of those that's always a bit overlooked when it comes to greatest lists, isn't he? Even though he's world champion in 85, I think a lot of people feel he won that because he was in the right car. But at the end of the day, he won the championship and he won 5 rallies in one season, which was quite some good going back then. He's got a total of 11 victories in the WRC on some pretty tough events. Like I say, he's not the first one you always think of, but what I'm judging Flying Finns off is their success in Finland, and he won the Thousand Lakes in 85 and 86 when the rally was dominated by all the top Finns in the Group B cars. So if he can win there twice in a row, then he must have been doing something right.
I found it quite difficult. I was thinking about Timo. It's kind of like the grey man. There's not too much to say about Timo. He had a fantastic career with Datsun. He was the highest paid rally driver in the world with Datsun, I believe. And I think that's why he stayed with them so long. He could have had a completely different career if he'd left them, I think. But he did win events with them as well. He did win 11 events altogether, but none of them were on tar again. There's a growing theme here with the Finns. None of them were on tar. So, but basically, what about you, James? I've basically not much to say about Timo. I love the guy for his. I love the fact that he got out a stage stand, pinged a flag out of the car.
Yeah. I think as a character, he was sort of like overlooked, like you say, but I think a bit more to him. I mean, he was sort of quite funny at times in interviews. And I say the fact he just had these big sort of glasses and a cigarette. He sort of looked cool, but not cool at the same time. But if there's a guy that kind of took his chance when it came, it's Timo, isn't it? He's had sort of long career. I think he had some time with Fiat in the 70s. And moved to Datsun, which basically an uncompetitive Group 2 car that did well on the endurance events. And I think he did rack up sort of rally wins in sort of New Zealand, Argentina, and Ivory Coast, didn't he, for Datsun, which is not to be sniffed at, given that it wasn't the quickest car. And then he signed in 85 for Peugeot as backup driver to Vatanen, didn't he? And Vatanen kind of started to go wrong for him. Timo just kind of seemed to put his foot down and kind of go into a new level of pace and just walked away with the title, didn't it? No one saw it coming, amazingly. He won 5 rallies in one season. Came back as defending world champion in 86 and also kind of performed pretty well that season. It's probably his 2 peak years, really, and he made the most of them. What's the point out? He did win a rally for Mazda, didn't he? I think he won the 87 Swedish second Group A event.
Yeah, first win for Mazda, and that was his last win.
So it's not a bad range of machine to be winning WRC events in. So again, I think he's the person on the list. Like I say, don't catch the imagination, such as a Vatanen or a Salonen or a Len, but the guy did the business.
Or a Toivonen. You're absolutely right. When I thought about I did think when he went to Mazda, he was no great shakes, didn't do much. But then you've got to realise that he was up against a Lancia, which was absolutely dominating Biasion. Yeah, it was the best car by an absolute mile.
Reliability.
So, can't compare him with that. What about yourself, John?
Yeah, he's a funny case, isn't he? He's not that well remembered. If you look back on it now, you would sort of think that he'd be more popular, as this kind of relaxed guy, like myself, a little bit overweight, smoking. You'd think he'd have come across as a bit of a kind of people's hero in a way, because he was, he wasn't the athlete that some of the others perhaps were. I think he was fortunate, perhaps, with being in the right car at the right time, and obviously with Vatanen having a pretty terrible start to 85, and then obviously the big accident. Didn't he win more Group B events than anyone though?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think he might have won 7. John, you're right.
I think he was the most winning Group B driver. So whether that was down to the car or the driver, I don't know. But I mean, it's it's a record that's his forever, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I did like his Dennis Taylor glasses. He was that wee and dumpy.
Like you say, he was just a bit tubby, wasn't he, and smoking. It didn't look like a rally driver, but liked him though for it.
If you look at today's competitors and you see this sports science and nutritionists and dietitians and they're built like racing snakes, then you see Timo Salah. Oh, brilliant. Bring it on. So, are we all done with Timo? Anybody else got anything to say about Timo? Okay. Now we're off to Ari Vatanen land. This could be a while. James.
Right, Ari. Wow. I know when we put our poll on Dave's page, he got twice as many votes as anybody else. So I mean, I've tried to sort of think against Ari in a lot of ways, thinking, well, he only won 1 world title, so he's behind quite a lot of guys on this list. But then I got thinking more and more. It was associated with like crashing a lot, wasn't he, throughout most of his career? Then something's occurred to me. The guy did win the World Championship in '81, and he also won, I think, 10 WRC rallies. But this is the thing. Back in the day, sort of 60s, 70s, and 80s, there were 3 rallies in particular regarded as the hardest and most diverse events. You had Monte Carlo, with its snow and ice tyre choice. You had Safari, with its kind of desert conditions and all-go distance endurance. And you have the RAC rally, 4 days and nights, lot of stays, miles, blind, no pace notes. Now, only one Finnish guy won all those 3 rallies back in that era, and it was Ari. So if he's that much of a hard charger and a crash merchant, he did that. Hannu didn't do it. Marku didn't do it. Henry didn't even enter the Safari, I don't think. So, yeah, the more I thought about it, the more I think, yeah, he's kind of deserved to be up there, really. And I think because he won a couple of Paris Dakars as well. So it was more than just a one-trick pony.
Cool.
Yeah. So for a guy who guy's a sort of hard-charging crash merchant, well, you look at the stats and he's a bit more to him than that. Plus, he was seen a lot in Britain, studied to the very famous sort of rally film, The Vatanen and Touch, which kind of made him a absolute legend of the sport. Very erudite and funny in English, which was rare for a lot of Scandinavians at the time. Very endearing, kind of charismatic guy that did a lot of good for the sport and sponsors and everything. And yeah, the more I think about it, the more I kind of see the further up the list he goes for me.
I think Ari Vatanen's synonymous with the best years of rallying. You think of Hannu, you think of Ari, and you think of Sideways. First and foremost, he's just all action. To his detriment, I suppose, in a way. This will go down like a lead balloon, because I can't really mention it because we've not to discuss Henry Toivonen. Henry Toivonen, for me, was as equally as dramatic as in his Sunbeam as Ari was. A lot of people don't seem to realise that. Just think.
No, I get that. You're right.
A lot of people think Vatanen and McRae were so similar, but so was Toivonen.
Yeah.
I've read Vatanen's book. It was incredible. That accident really knocked him for 6.
Very moving, yeah.
Absolutely. But then he came back. Was it Sierra? Sierra Cosworth at Texaco in '87 in Finland. I think he was second overall. He's such a gentleman. Maybe that's why he ended up in politics. I don't know. He was a great speaker. He was at Colin McRae's service. Thousands went, and what a talk he did! He was unbelievable. He got people upset just when he spoke. He was a great ambassador for the sport. Plus, he's raced to the start. What was that? Hill climbing in America.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete.
That event as well. Yeah.
Fantastic
that.
video. He won 4 Paris-Dakars, but should he not have won? They won, including the one he put the car stolen.
Yeah.
Part of the event, they reckoned it was somebody from in the team or somebody with a lot of rallying knowledge, because most people couldn't have started the car.
Yeah.
His fight back on 85 Monte Carlo against Walter, the master of Monte, after Terry Harriman made a very rare mistake. It was one of the greatest comebacks ever in sport. He's only won the one title, but he's right up there as well. He's done so much for the sport. John?
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think for me, and people draw the Colin McRae comparison because of the kind of win or bust approach, but I think for me, he's one of those drivers that transcends his record. His record is very good, particularly if you look a little bit wider than just the WRC. But he's just one of those drivers, isn't he? He's one of the first people you would think of when you think of rallying, and so it goes far beyond his record. And I think if it hadn't been for how 85 had turned out, things may have looked very different. That kind of ended his really real professional career, didn't it? It probably ended him having another genuine crack at it.
Yeah.
So I think he was out for a period, suffered some mental health problems, and I think the game had moved on a bit, and there was new drivers come along, and he didn't get the chance again. But yeah, I mean, he's just a legend, isn't he? And probably one of the most charismatic people the sport has ever produced, which is pretty impressive considering drivers are not often charismatic types. And another one who was fast over multiple eras, fast in escorts and things, fast in Group B, and still fast in Group A.
Absolutely. I think he did get a chance with Subaru in '92.
I was going to say, he got other WRC drive, but he wasn't necessarily #1 driver, was he, by then? And I suspect he got those drive because of his personality and popularity and the sponsorship that brings. He's a great ambassador, like you say, which I think give his career longevity.
That accident didn't slow him down, believe it or not. I mean, he had a few crashes with the Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sweden and New Zealand comes to mind, certainly. I think he was still up there.
I think he had the pace, but I don't know if he quite had the opportunities. I think when he was in the Subaru, I mean, the Legacy was never that competitive compared to some of the, the Celicas and things. But I think if 85 had gone differently, I think we may have seen more than one championship.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
One of my abiding memories in the sport was seeing him, I think it was in Twigley's, just seen the back end first in the 205, the T16, just the back end, and the whole thing scrabbling towards me. Memories of this, dreams are made, honestly. Okay, move on to a big hitter again, a proper big hitter, KKK, Juha Kankinen. Right, he won a championship, 3 different makes of car. Was it 4 championships he had? 4, I think it was 4. 23 overall wins. Dodgy moustache. 1 Dakar. Different eras, longevity. Fantastic driver. Absolutely fantastic driver. He was quick all his career, even at the end. I think he retired far too young. Not got much more to say than just incredible driver from his Toyota days. In fact, did he win that Safari when he was joint first place with Aldegaard? Joint first place on a Safari. Can you imagine that? Incredible. But from then on, he blew everybody away. He was just fantastic. In the Peugeot, the Escort Cosworth, Toyota, Lancia. He just had everything, James?
Yeah, I was going to say just a couple of things to add. In that era, he won the 85 Safari, which was his first attempt at the event. And then he won the 86 Swedish, which was his first attempt at that event. So you're talking two of the most specialised events of all time. He just rocked up and won them both. That's incredible.
I think the Acropolis as well.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Yeah, that's just that alone is quite phenomenal, really. I mean, that's just the start of it. And he was still winning rallies in the late 90s, wasn't he? I think he was winning somewhere in about 1999, New Zealand or something.
He won Argentina and Finland. He won in 99, yeah.
Yeah, incredible. So, but throughout the years in between, he was just basically the top guy in the sport, pretty much. Other people come in challenging, like Sainz and McRae. But yeah, it's throughout different eras. So, I mean, Group B, Group A, 4 world titles spanning Group B, Group A, in 3 different makes of car. Won events in for other manufacturers like Subaru. Well, yeah, it's just. I mean, you could go on, but he was basically the top of his game for such a long time. And even before he won his first event at Safari, I mean, he performed pretty well and sort of surprised a few people on the RAC and the Thousand Lights and things, aren't he, in the Toyota.
Mm-hmm. It
was obviously Toyota recognised his talent early on, didn't he, and snapped him up when he was still young.
Because I think he was in a Manta, wasn't he?
Yeah, on Group A Manta.
Did he do the Mintex?
83 Mintex, I was there, aged 8 or something.
What were you, John?
Yeah,
were you there in 83?
No.
Were you there in 93?
I could have been there in 93. I was 9.
All right, okay. What, do you know much about Kankkunen, John?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, what do you say about Kankkunen? I mean, never mind this list. I think you could argue he's probably one of the greatest rally drivers, out of anyone. Yeah, competitive across the eras, as you guys have said. I think most podiums of anyone in our top 10, I believe. Joint most titles as well. He won the Race of Champions twice, as a little aside, as well as winning Dakar. Obviously, Ogier has only just matched his feat of winning with 3 manufacturers. I think he was just a complete driver and one of those guys, one of those handful of guys that knows when to push and when to sit back and wait for someone else to fall off to drive for the result, and make sure you score the points. I don't want to plug someone else's show, but Nicky Grist did that podcast with Chris Harris, and they talked a lot about Nicky's time with Kankkunen, and yeah, he was just a machine. He knew exactly what to do to win championship.
And it just reminds me of the Nicky Grist accident with Kankkunen in Catalonia, in the Toyota, that long left-hander. It was a huge accident.
The illegal turbo.
Pardon?
With the illegal turbo.
Absolutely. And
I'm going to blame Kankkunen for that, though.
Could have had a fifth champ. Probably would have had a 5th championship that year.
Yeah, he still had a shot, didn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
Have you spoke about tankers, David?
No, not yet. So I think you've covered most of it. But yeah, he was really on a roll, wasn't he? Once he started winning rallies, I think when he won the championship in '86, he was the youngest world champion, and then he was the first driver to win more than 2 titles. First driver to get 20 wins in the WRC. And like you say, the longevity, the fact that he was winning towards the end. And he was also a big character as well. Like he was saying about Nicky Grist, he used to say that they'd have a mental stage where they're driving absolutely flat out. They get to the end, look at Juha to say, oh, what about that? Where we went wide or whatever, and Juha's just there like stroking his tash and taking it real chilled like. And the stage interviews as well, like with the tyre question. It's black and it's round.
What was the one he said about the corner? I like that one. Where the speed was great, the corner was too tight.
Yeah, that was it when he ruined that Escort.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just an absolute machine, wasn't he? Really, it wasn't actually the fastest Finn. It didn't look as flamboyant as the others, but like you were saying, he knew when to push, and he got the results. He got the podiums, and if it was a list of greatest drivers, he'd definitely be in the top 3 or 4 for definite.
Okay. My question is, was his moustache better than Pondy's?
Well, I think he maybe looked after it better.
Was it better than Jon's?
And we're going to
definitely, yeah.
change it to Camden's sash.
Okay, folks. Another big hitter, Tommy Mackinnon, or the Scottish guy, Tam McKinnon. 24 overall wins, 4 championships, all in the same car, it has to be said. Single-handedly responsible for Colin McRae not winning more. He absolutely raised the profile of Mitsubishi. I think what I remember, apart from his impressive speed, obviously, was Colin McRae was asked, who's the worst person to be against in a straight fight? You know, and he instantly said, Tommy. He says, I think I could beat anybody. Tommy, I'm not sure about it. He's just so quick. From start to finish, he's flat on it all the time. So I really like Tommy. Apart from I was such a huge McRae fan. Bless you, Cole. And I didn't like Tommy at the time. After McRae, you know, once I grew up a bit and started appreciating him as a driver, not just in that, he wasn't just quick and evil, he was quick in everything he drove. And it was great to see him coming into team management. I thought it was fantastic. So that's it for me, Tommy. Right, we'll go to Jon on this one.
Well, this is a bit more my era. Yeah, I just want to pick up on the team management point. I think that's really important because I think he's the only driver to win a the only man, I should say, to win a world championship as a driver and as a team boss. So that's quite a unique stat. And I think you could argue that he probably deserves a lot of credit for getting Toyota to come back. I think his relationship with Akio Toyoda, who's the president of Toyota, their relationship, the fact that he built cars for him, that I think that's a big part of the reason why Toyota came back. So I think we've got a lot to thank him for beyond what he did in the car. In terms of his driving, I think it's a funny one, isn't it? Because there's other drivers that have won with more teams, but I think for him to win 4 consecutive drivers' titles in probably, I think you could argue, one of the most competitive eras against McRae, Sainz, Kanken, and those sorts of drivers, that's a hell of a record, isn't it? And like some of the others with other brands, he put Mitsubishi on the map, had a car named after him, and that says a lot about him, doesn't it?
Absolutely agree. Dave?
Yeah, like you're saying, to win those 4 championships at the time he did, it's not like the Mitsubishi was the all-dominant car. Like his teammates were not exactly right behind him. I know Burnsy had a couple of wins, but Freddie Loix wasn't anywhere, was he? And he also had quite a lot of success on tarmac, which is rare for the Finns. He won Monte Carlo 4 times. He won San Remo. He won Catalunya. And like you say, his rivalry with McRae at the time, I was a McRae fan and didn't really appreciate Tommy winning all the time. But when you look back, absolutely incredible driver. Do you remember the battle that him and Colin had on the Midland Rally in 1992? Tommy came over in a Nissan Sunny GTIR, and Colin's in the Legacy, of course. Went right down to the last stage, and Colin won it by 2 seconds. So I think that was the start of the last stage battles between those two. But yeah, to win those 4 championships in that era, that really puts him up there, I think.
You guys think that that was the best era in the WRC? A lot of people will go for.
I mean, obviously,
yeah, I think it's definitely up there, and for competitiveness, it's right up there, isn't there? I think.
I'd agree. I did go to the WRC rally in Wales a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was phenomenal. It's just so many different cars, manufacturers involved, and there were about 4 or 5, 6 drivers competing against each other who had all won world titles in that era. Imagine that today. Just,
that was the thing. It was the one time where you actually had enough cars for all the great drivers.
Yeah. A great
So
point.
the Group B era was great, but that was mainly because of the cars. The rallies weren't that close, and it was basically whichever car finished won the rally. So the WRC era was much more of a benchmark, I think.
Well, that particular era, the cars were faster than Group B, and the crowds were just as crazy and huge.
Yeah.
What a time. It was fantastic. And then you had Skoda coming in, Hyundai, Seat off the back of all this. It was just a great time. I would go as far as saying it was the best time. That's only because the WRC wasn't around really in the 70s. But in my lifetime, I would definitely say that period was the greatest, So, we're all finished with Tommy.
I've not said anything yet, but I've not got anything to add, to be honest with you. What you've already said, similar to you guys, I kind of probably didn't respect him at the time, so I wanted Colin to win all the time. And we didn't get to see the best of him in Rally GB. I don't think he ever won that one.
No, it's strange.
Surprising for a Finn, isn't it? But he was probably the best of all the Finns on tarmac. His record is amazing. Considering how a lot of the other greats struggled on tarmac. He just won tarmac events regularly.
He did win Catalonia, but I would always argue that Monte Carlo's not a tarmac rally. No, that sounds daft.
No.
Traditionally, it's such a specialist event,
But when he won San Remo in 99, was it? He beat Panizzi in a full-on fight. So
that's kind of not easy to do.
Yeah.
Okay, are we all Tommied out?
Yeah.
Okay, right, I'm going to admit, guys, I'm out of my depth here a wee bit. I don't know too much about Mika Hirvonen. I know that he
got
had...
Marcus Gronholm.
Sorry?
Marcus Gronholm, innit?
What about him?
He's next.
We're doing Marcus Gronholm.
Are we? Right, Dave, on you go.
I talked myself into that one, didn't I? So Marcus is quite similar to Tommy in a way. They both actually were around a lot longer before they had the success than people remember. I think when Marcus won his first world title, he was about 32 years old. But then when he started winning again, it was quite hard to stop him, especially 2002. He dominated that season. And then he came close with Ford again in 2006, 2007. Is the Finn with the most wins, 30 WRC victories, and he equaled Mikkola's record in Finland for 7 victories. So he's got the stats, but he's probably not as revered as much as some of the other guys we've already mentioned. But maybe generations to come, people will look back at him as fondly as we look back at Mikkola, Vatanen, Kankkunen. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say, really.
So why would you say he's not as revered? Why is that?
I don't know. Just he's not I know he's the most recent sort of winning Finn, but I don't think he made as much as an impact as the others because everything else had been done already. You know what I mean? He didn't really do anything that the others didn't do.
Yeah, he's a bit like Salonen, isn't he? In that he's sort of been forgotten a little bit. But I mean, stats wise, he's right up there. I think the Peugeot days, I think you could argue that the 206 was probably the quickest car in the championship during his winning years. He was unlucky with mechanicals in 2001. You know, if the car had been running properly, he probably should have won that because it was faster than Subaru and Ford. And I think, and this is going to be a theme for the last couple of drivers as well, I think he was latterly a bit of a victim of the Loeb/Citroen effect, wasn't he? You know, might have gone on to more if it hadn't been for what came to pass from 2003 onwards. So yeah, but you know, I think stats wise, he's right up there. I just don't know if he quite captured the imagination as some of his forebears did.
That's a good point. A really good point. I think you're right about his capturing imagination. I think he's actually, regardless of his world titles, he seems to be remembered most for that stage finish thing, you know.
I was going to say that as well when it came to me.
I actually remember him. He did a Scottish in a Toyota, Group A Toyota, and he got out of the car.
94-ish, yeah.
It would be about then, I think it was second, third or fourth, I can't remember. But he was about 39 foot tall. Massive. Honestly, Jolly Green Giant, he walked into his Toyota. But great driver. Great. Rally, you've got to remember, rallies continue to evolve and get faster and faster. You know, you could argue right now that Tanak is the fastest has ever been. Because for me, he's the fastest driver in the championship just now. And it's never been as quick as it is now. And then you look at Gronholm, who was the most recent Finn, you could argue. And he was on top, well on top. And it was a lot quicker than the Vatanen days, the Group B days, you know, the Tommy Mäkinen days, even. So it's a shame, and I absolutely understand what you're saying about him not being revered. But you're absolutely right. James?
Yeah, I'm going to take a bit of exception because I absolutely love Gronholm. I thought it was amazing. Like I say, 30 WRC wins, that's kind of, I mean, that until Loeb came along, that was just looked like it never be beaten. Dominated his home rally in Finland, as you said, 7 wins on there. I mean, that's just incredible. Yeah, just general sort of speed of him. And I think a bit like Mark, I seem to have a lot of anger in him as well. I quite like that about him. We'd often be fuming at the end, and particularly about like that Peugeot 307 that was awful. And he used to basically slag it off, didn't he, in the interviews and just like punch things. Yeah,
greatest mind.
Yeah, I kind of I loved him for that. Just again, the era that I was sort of like following the WRC pretty most closely, because they would have kind of, you know, when I had my own car and sort of my own mates, when we'd all go together and kind of stay over and for 3 or 4 days at a time in Wales, and we'd watch it. I mean, I was nearly there. You know, the time when he rolled it on Epping, so on the WRC, the years lead. I was on the next corner, and we saw the helicopter coming. And it's his turn, and we sort of turn around and go back. So I better get up there quickly. And as I got there, he's just getting out of the car. There's a wreckage of another Mitsubishi next to him. He just gets out of the car, waves at the crowd, and he's hitting a helicopter and going, "What a superstar!"
He wasn't bothered.
Someone who didn't see him from where you were standing. Is that tall?
Yeah, he was a big lad. But yeah, I kind of think it's quite hard to split him and Mäkinen, really, for me. I know Mäkinen's got the sort of 4 world titles. I do think Gronholm should and could have had more. I think even in the Loeb era, I don't think Loeb was as quick as Gronholm on gravel. I certainly think, if you look at 2003, 4, 5, watch some of those, Loeb never got close to Gronholm on gravel. Gronholm won a lot of events, or he binned it, or the car broke on him. But for out and out pace, even Loeb couldn't keep him in that time, which I think is a big thing to say.
So you like angry drivers? You like Alain?
Well, I like that kind of personality and anger they bring.
I think you.
I like the grumpy gits. Yeah.
I think you're a Mats Osberg fan. Hey, you'd like Peter Sutcliffe. He was quite angry. I bet he was mad in a rally car as well.
I'm not going to comment about that on a public video.
Yorkshire boys, see your hero. Right, anyway, if that's us all done with Gronholm, we move on to my faux pas, because I've not studied anything about Hirvonen, and I really should have. I know he's got about 15 wins, 69 podiums, something like that, nearly 70 podiums, is it? I might be wrong.
Yeah, 69.
60 stage wins. I don't know. And that's about it. I know he did Dakar, didn't do particularly well, 4th or 5th. Obviously a very fast man. Certainly not one of my favourites. Perhaps I think I maybe fell out of love with the WRC at that point. I'm not going to sit here and try and blag it. I'm going to turn it straight to John.
You.
Yeah, he's a tricky one, isn't he? He's a victim of a lot of things, a victim of Loeb, and a victim of an era where there was only 2 teams for a good chunk of his time in the championship. You know, it was just Ford v Citroën. The Ford wasn't as good as the Citroën, and as we found when Hirvonen eventually joined Citroën alongside Loeb, he wasn't as good as Loeb was. So it's a tough one, isn't it? I think, you know, he was there a long time. You know, 15 wins. I suppose you could say that taking 15 wins against Loeb is something, but yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? It's just one of those drivers I think you have to feel a bit sorry for, isn't it? Like so many sportsmen, you go into a sport when one of the all-time greats is there, your record's just never going to look as good as it could have been. So, you know, I think lack of success is perhaps not entirely his own doing.
Do you think we're a bit blasé when it comes to the modern era of rallying? I mean, we're talking about Hirvonen, he's certainly a revered either, I would imagine. Gronholm, as the further back we go, we get nostalgic, we get tinted eyes, tinted glasses on, and you know, we think of Vatanen. I mean, Vatanen, how many wins did he have? 10, was it?
10, yeah.
Hirvonen had 15. You know, I mean, we kind of just gloss over some things, I think, with the modern era.
Yeah.
Strange. Anyway, James.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you can't really look at a guy that's got 15 WRC wins. If he's quick enough to get WRC wins, the guy can drive, can't he? And I think we were actually agonising about who to include and who not to include in this debate. And I personally thought that how can we justify putting Penty or Henry in with like 4 wins between them? This guy's got 15 and not put him in. What I will say, John's absolutely right in that he did look second best to Loeb. He joined the same team as Loeb and looked second best to Loeb. He also was the teammate to Gronholm at Ford, and he was second best to Gronholm as well. So I think that's pretty why he was, despite his wins, it seemed like he was a number 2 backup driver that ended up being the number 1 driver and just wasn't anywhere near the level of Loeb. Unfortunately, because the guy's obviously got talent and a lot of wins and a lot of great results. But in what has to be said is quite a weak year for the WRC. Dave?
Yeah, there's a theme of the second best thing because he was runner-up in the championship 4 times, I think. You could probably compare him to like Neville and Evans now. He would be good enough to be world champion if there wasn't someone called Sebastian there. Like you say, I think he was sort of all of a sudden number 1 at Ford when Gronholm retired. And when Latvala was promoted to number 2, it looked like Latvala was going to outshine him to begin with. He got a win in before Hirvonen did, but then Hirvonen gathered momentum. And then, like you say, when he went to Citroën, it was clear that he didn't have the skills to beat Loeb at his own game. But, you know, the 15 wins and that definitely proves that he had good pace and good consistency. And he is probably one of the last great flying Finns at the moment because there doesn't really seem to be any coming on at the moment. Well, none that are getting a chance anyway. So, yeah, that's Mika Hirvonen.
Okay. Right, Yari, Latvala, James.
Right, I love Latvilla, but he's a bit of the old enigma wrapped in a conundrum, isn't he? So just seemed to be his own worst enemy at times. You know, his demons in his mind or whatever just stopped him doing well when he didn't have those, he was blindingly fast. You know, took on the Toyota. I think gave Toyota its first win back, didn't he? I think in 2020. That was a great achievement. But obviously, still his record, I believe, stands as the youngest WRC. I think was he 22 when he?
I think he was 24. He was only like a few months younger than Toivonen or something.
Yeah. Again, I think possibly been a different era. If there was no Sebastians around, he probably would have won a WRC title. You know, he went to the right teams. He actually signed for VW when Ogier was there. Unlike Herven and Lowe, Latvia did actually take the fight to Ogier and did beat him fair and square on quite a lot of events, but possibly his weakness on tarmac is what stopped him winning the world title, because Ogier never ever messed up, and Jari Mats did mess up on tarmac a few times, and that just cost him the chance of being a world champion. But that said, 18 WRC wins for different manufacturers. He's won Toyota, Ford, and VW, hasn't he? So hard to say this about a guy that's won 18 WRC, but probably a wasted talent. And I think he retired too soon from the US as a driver. But fair play to him, good luck to him as a manager.
Absolutely. He had good stats, 18 wins, 67 podiums. That's some going. Am I right? Was it 539 stage wins? That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. That's just off the top of my head. Got nothing to do with us. And John, you've not spoken of him yet, have you?
No, he's another victim of Sebastian. Poor bugger was victim to two of them though, whereas I suppose Sutherland was two as well, but not quite so much. But yeah, and as James said, a strange case in a lot of ways. He seemed to have to battle his own head as much as the people he was on the stages with. And I mean, in a straight fight, if he was in the right frame of mind, he was as quick as anyone for, you know, good chunks of his career. So yeah, so despite, you know, Sebastian dominance, perhaps could have done even better, but still has a pretty good record. I think, yeah, retired too early. But that, I think, is just a result of there not being enough seats, isn't there? You know, he lost his drive. I think he only did one event privately in the Aris in the end, didn't he? And it's just, you know, once you're out now, it's very difficult to get back because there's so few cars, and it's not possible to run a car privately to prove yourself. So I don't think I blame him for taking the management job, and I'm sure that he's going to preside over some success this year. So yeah, you can't begrudge him that. But yeah, I think another nearly man who in a different era might have had a couple of championships to his name.
Well said. Absolutely agree. Well, that concludes it, guys. So now is top three time. My picture's just
lost the poster. We won't worry about that.
Have you all got a top three in your head?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm struggling.
Right. Okay, I'll just go as we've written them down. John, what's your top three? Third place.
Oh, it's gone.
Moving on.
Top three. Okay, I struggled with third place. I was torn, but I just gave it to Vatanen over Mikkola.
Ooh.
Just because of it's an emotional choice, that one, because of Vatanen is just a legend.
Second.
Second spot for me is Mäkinen, Tommy Mäkinen, that is. I should say, be specific. Just for dominating in the most competitive era of the sport, really.
Okay.
And for me, there's only ever been one guy that can win this, and that's Kankkunen. Longevity, ability, tactics, just the complete rally drum.
Yep, that's quite hard to argue with that, John, to be honest with you. I'm dare say James Caan. What's yours, James? James Caan, he was an actor.
Yeah, it's good, wasn't it?
What are yours?
I was just, right, this is really difficult. I've got 4 candidates for 3rd place, and I've got to pick one of them. So this is between Allen and Vatanen and Mäkinen. But I'm going to have to go, because I loved his anger. I'm going to go for Gronholm 3rd.
Ooh.
Might be a bit of a shock. I mean, I really wanted to get Harry in there, but I just couldn't do it. The standard's just so high in this, isn't it? So second, and again, second and first are sort of like just about equal. But I've got to give it to one of them. So I'm going for second, Mikkola. Just, you know, he's the greatest of his era by an absolute mile, really. And he's won so much stuff and did so much to change the sport and the face of the sport and the image of the sport forever. But number one's got to be Kankkunen. What can you say about 4 WRC titles over sort of, well, I think it's three WRC, was it 4? 4 WRC titles and 3 different makes of car, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Group A and Group B. So, and you think he won WRC events in other cars, won the Safari as his first attempt, won the Safari in a 2-wheel drive car. Wow, just his achievements are just, you know, incredible. Kankkunen number 1.
Okay. Again, this is so tight, subjective. Dave, let's go, pal.
All right. Number 3, I've actually changed my mind whilst we've been doing this. It's the same top 3, but in a different order. So number 3 is Tommi Mäkinen. And I'm going to put Hannu Mikkola number 2, just because he's one of the originals and just achieved so much first. And number 1 is the same as the others. You are Kankkunen.
Okay, we've got a common theme going on here. Once I read them back to you. Okay. For me, number 3, Marco Alem. Just such a amazing part of the history of the sport. So many wins, stage wins, everything, just character. Number 2, Tommy Tam McKinnon, Scottish boy, number 2. And for me, you're going to hate me, right? I've got 2 at 1. Sorry.
You can't do that.
Can't separate Hannu Mikkola and KKK. Kankkunen's record is just incredible. But for me, Hannu Mikkola is Mr. Rallying, or was. So I'm sorry for having number 1.
Yeah, I think that's 4 sides. Anyway.
I wish I'd thought of putting 4 drivers in my top 3.
Tommy,
I put 6 in mine.
yeah.
We're all equal third viewers.
Basically,
Yeah.
we've all got Tommy, Mikkola, and Kankkunen. But there's an Allen on the side, and there's also Gronholm on the side. So when you think about the other ones we've left out, guys, you know,
I really want to put Vatanen and Allen in there. There's just not enough room in the top 3.
I honestly thought more Allens would have been in there.
I think
The older guys would have put that. I mean, I'm sorry. I guess my age, as I span both eras age-wise, so I'm aware of, you know, older ones and younger ones. But I think the older guard would have probably put Marco in there.
Here's a question for you: how long has it been since a Finn won the WRC?
Whoa, 19 years.
19 years. Gronholm 2002.
Who'd have thought that? When I was growing up, it was all Finns. And I could never imagine that. I could never imagine that the French started doing so well. Also, I mean, if you think of Ragnotti winning in Corsica and the Renault 5, and then all of a sudden, 94, you got Oriole winning. And then it just took off.
Yeah, because they could never win on gravel, could they, before, couldn't the French? And
They never got the chance,
Oriole
though.
came along, yeah.
But that's the difference in the sport now. All drivers have got to win on everything.
Yeah.
The Finns could never really win on tarmac properly. You know?
Yeah.
It's just
That's what changed when Carlos Sainz and Didier Auriol started. They made sure they were good everywhere, and that sort of changed the sport then in the 90s.
I think Oriole went, did he not win Finland?
Yeah.
And he also won Australia, I think. And that's incredible for a Frenchman at that time. Unheard of. You know, so anyway, guys.
Sainz did the same. Sainz won the RAC, didn't he, as well? And that was also incredible.
Yeah, he couldn't beat Jimmy in 88 in the Scottish, though. And the 33 Export Sierra. That was amazing. Anyway, right, guys. It's been a pleasure again. Just a final thank you to ScottishDrifting.com and Harkness Competition Tyres. And we'll have to think of a subject for the next time. We'll see how this one gets on.
Wearing.
Sorry?
Wearing in rallying.
Right, so anyway, guys, we'll take care and I'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye for now, everyone.